Is it ghost things? No. Maybe it's Stranger Busters. It's a fucking shit show! What you think you see, what you think you hear, that's what it's about. Mood and atmosphere. No, it's fucking garbage. It's garbage. Mood and atmosphere. Now that I really like. That's what I'm looking for. That's what I want to see. Hey folks, how you doing? Dave McRae here. Yes, that's right. In this video, I want to talk about that news that dropped just a couple of days ago. I mean, nothing major, of course, but in regards to the new Ghost Things movie, the new Ghostbusters movie. And that is, of course, we have some new casting news. Now, like I said, it's nothing major, but slowly but surely, as they move towards principal photography this summer, more casting news and information is coming out about this new Ghostbusters movie. Now, before I give you my thoughts on that and where I think this new Ghostbusters movie is actually heading based on the information we have thus far and a prediction that I'm going to give, which really isn't rocket science, I'm sure many of you have probably predicted and thought the exact same thing. Nonetheless, before I do that, let's start here. So, a couple of months ago, as we all know, they dropped a teaser, if you will, if you want to even call it that, announcing that they're going to be doing a new Ghostbusters movie, and I did a video on that. And I was excited about that, as a lot of us were, and I think the most shocking thing about that teaser was not necessarily the stuff that was in the teaser. I mean, that's cool. We got to see the original Ecto-1, and we got to hear the original, Ghostbusters score, and hear the original sound effects for the proton packs, and all that juicy nostalgic shit, right? But that, in and of itself, I don't think was the real shocking thing. I think the real shocking thing for everybody was the fact that that little promotional teaser existed at all. Because unbeknownst to everybody, not everybody, but most people, including myself, I had no idea that not only was Sony Pictures in development on a new Ghostbusters movie, but they were so far along in development that they had this little promotional teaser set to go, and they were essentially in the beginning stages of pre-production, if not well into it, getting ready to go to camera this summer for a release date next summer, 2020. I mean, this isn't something that Sony Pictures announced and said, yeah, we're going to be doing a new Ghostbusters movie, look out for it for the summer of, 2024. No, this is like, yeah, like it's happening and it's happening now. And it's like, what the hell, right? And then, of course, you put that aside and you look at the other information that came with that teaser and you realize that, holy shit, this is like Ghostbusters 3. This is going to be taking place in the original canon timeline. It's going to act as an official sequel to the 1989 Ghostbusters 2. So it's like 30 years in the making here, and it's going to completely negate the events and the movie from 2016, I'm sure to the joy of many people. Even though I actually quite like that movie on its own merits. Having said that, we didn't really know anything more about that. And of course, my video, I speculated on what it could mean in terms of Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and Ernie Hudson and Annie Potts and Rick Moranis and not Harold Ramis, unfortunately, because he passed away a couple years ago. But what does this mean, right? Is this the Ghostbusters 3 we've been waiting for? Now, there's a big difference between it is the Ghostbusters 3 we've been waiting for, but it's not necessarily the Ghostbusters 3 we've been waiting for, if you catch my drift. It all depends on where you put the emphasis, okay? It's definitely the Ghostbusters 3 we've been waiting for. We've been waiting for a Ghostbusters 3, and they're doing it. There it is. That's the one we've been waiting for. But it's not necessarily the Ghostbusters 3 we've been waiting for. And that sort of, is a great segue into kind of what I want to talk about here in terms of this new information that has dropped. Now, back a couple of months ago, we also knew or at least it was reported that they were seeking to cast 2 male teenagers and 2 female teenagers. And that led a lot of people to speculate, oh, is this going to be like a younger teenage Ghostbusters? Because even the original Ghostbusters movie, they were not teenagers. They were like well into their late 20s, early 30s. They were a bit younger than I am now. I'll be 40 in excuse me, I'll be 40 in May. But their characters in the original Ghostbusters were like, yeah, late 20s, early 30s, right? Well, they're seeking teenagers? Are they going to drop it all the way to like 70? Is this going to be a teeny bopper film? Like, what the fuck are they doing, right? So we didn't really know how the original characters were going to be involved, and even if they were going to be involved. So now some more information has started to come out in terms of the direction of where this is going to go. And this is according to bloodydisgusting.com. And bloodydisgusting.com says, McKenna Grace, last seen playing a young Carol Danvers in Marvel Studios' Captain Marvel, has booked the lead role in Sony's sequel, writes The Wrap. She would join Stranger Things and It star Finn Wolfhard and Carrie Coon from Widows in the canonized sequel to the original Ghostbusters films. Now, this is really all we know about this new sequel. It's not really a synopsis. It's more, I guess it's a log line, but it's barely even that. And there's nothing specific in here. This could be pertaining to any genre, any movie. But this is what it says. It says, a family moves back home to a small town where they learn more about who they are. Well, I mean, there's so many psychological aspects that you could implement on that. There's philosophical aspects that you could implement on that. So really, there's nothing, it doesn't really give us anything, but certainly there's enough there. And when I look at who they're casting, you know, McKenna Grace, Finn Wolfhard, Carrie Coon, they're a family. Okay, all right, okay. I have a good idea of where this is probably going to go. So my prediction is, if this is true, and if this is totally legit, and it absolutely ends up being McKenna Grace, Finn Wolfhard, and Carrie Coon, which for all, I mean, as all we know, that is true, okay? If nothing changes, then yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science. So this is probably the narrative that they're going to go with. So Carrie Coon is the mom, Finn Wolfhard is the son, and the older brother to McKenna Grace. Okay, and they probably move back home, and I would imagine that the mom knows about her lineage to one of the original Ghostbusters. Obviously, it's not going to be Ernie Hudson because he's black, so I would assume that it would be either to Bill Murray or Dan Aykroyd. Probably Dan Aykroyd, or maybe even Harold Ramis's Egon Spengler. Okay? Because if you look at Finn Wolfhard and you look at Harold Ramis, you could totally, yeah, I would totally buy that they were related. I could totally buy that Finn Wolfhard is the grandson of an Egon Spengler. Okay? And maybe Egon passed away when Finn was I'm saying his real name, because obviously I don't know his character name yet, when Finn was very young. So he never knew his grandfather. And of course, neither would McKenna Grace's character because she's much younger than Finn. But Carrie Coon's character does know because that's her dad. Okay, let's say, right? And maybe she's a little embarrassed by the Ghostbusters lineage. She's embarrassed by where she comes from. You know, maybe, I don't know, right? Maybe she's trying to suppress it. But then McKenna Grace and Finn Wolfhard discover Ecto-1, or they discover something about their past and they realize that they have Ghostbusters in their lineage, that their grandfather was an iconic Ghostbuster. He's legendary. Wow, that was Grandpa. Holy shit. And then, of course, you introduce Ray Stans in there somewhere, and, you know, and that's probably going to be and then, of course, shit happens and they have to step up to the plate somehow. And then you introduce Dan Aykroyd somewhere in there to sort of be that passing of the torch and that mentor, and sort of, to teach the kids about their grandfather and who they all were. And then maybe if you can convince Bill Murray to come back, maybe he's in there somewhere, whatever. I highly doubt Rick Moranis will be in this movie at all. I highly doubt Annie Potts will be in this movie at all. Although, of course, it's entirely possible. But just based on that alone, it's unnecessary, because the focus is going to be on this family. The focus is going to be on this self-discovery of who they are, right? Well, who they are to me means where they come from in terms of their lineage, in terms of their past, something about their past that has been suppressed for whatever reason. And these two kids come to realize, wow, fuck, holy shit, that was Grandpa? I always knew about the Ghostbusters. Like, you heard how they saved New York City twice. Like, holy shit, I didn't know that was Grandpa. What the fuck? Do you know what I mean? And that's sort of where it's kind of going to go off. Now, whether the mom knows about it and is suppressed, maybe the mom doesn't even know. I don't know. I'm just thinking that maybe to protect her kids or something, maybe she's just, for whatever reason, she doesn't talk about it because maybe she's embarrassed about it because she had to live through childhood being embarrassed by her. Although I don't understand why you would be embarrassed by the Ghostbusters because they saved New York fucking City twice. Why you'd need to be embarrassed by them, I don't know. So maybe that's not the direction they're going, but it's gonna fall somewhere in there. Like there's only so many different directions you can go with something like this. Okay, so if you have a family that moves back to a small town where they learn more about who they are, well, it's like, okay, go. Like there's only so many things, there's only so many directions you can go in terms of the narrative. Do you know what I mean? So it's really not rocket science. And I think that's probably the direction they're going to go. And it's going to rely heavily on this family. Yeah. Whether Finn Wolfhard's character has friends that come on board and then that's what gives it that Stranger Things vibe and the girl is tagging along. And I don't know. But, yeah, this is definitely not going to be the Ghostbusters 3 we've wanted for 30 years. It's not going to be. I don't see it being that movie at all. And you know what? I get it. Like, look, agree with him or not. I understand what Bill Murray was talking about. You know, he said on many occasions, look, nobody wants to see a bunch of 70-year-old fat guys running around in Ghostbuster costumes. I mean, I'd go see it. You'd go see it. I'd go see Indiana Jones at 85. But you get what he's trying to say, right? Ghostbusters 3, the Ghostbusters 3 that we wanted with Annie Potts and Rick Moranis and Dan Aykroyd and Bill Murray and Ernie Hudson and Harold Ramis and whatever. That movie that we wanted centered around them as the central characters and the central protagonists and some crazy fucking epic third film and maybe a conclusion to a trilogy. Yeah, that's long gone. That's long gone. And that's been long gone for like 15 years. That hasn't, I mean, the prime real estate for that movie was like early 90s, you know, because the Ghostbusters 2 was 89. So maybe Ghostbusters 3, 93, maybe 94. You might have been able to get it in there in the late 90s. You may have been able to push it in the early 2000s. But by the time you get to the mid 2000s, it's gone. It's gone. Like nobody, like, no. It's gone. And Bill Murray, like it or not, has seen that and been like, I don't want to, this is ridiculous. I don't want to do that. Now, he came back as a cameo in the 2016 film, but he wasn't playing Peter Venkman. He just came back as a passing of the torch because they were hoping that would be successful. And he wanted to sort of just kind of do his little thing and all right, I'll do it. And they no doubt paid him well. And he did that, but he wasn't Peter Venkman in that movie. So even if they get the original remaining Ghostbusters, right? Ernie Hudson, Dan Aykroyd, and Bill Murray to be in this movie, well, let's say they're playing themselves now. Okay. So they're not playing the whoever they were in the other film in 2016. They actually are playing themselves, but the screen time could be the same. It could just be the same cameo or the same amount of time, but now they're actually playing Peter Venkman, Ray Stantz, and Winston Zeddemore. So this is not I think we have to realize here that doesn't mean the movie's not going to be good. It doesn't mean when we go to the theater, we walk away going, that actually was really fun. That actually was a really good Ghostbusters movie. And many of you may actually really like it more than the 2016 film. But this is not, and I get it. I understand why. I do. But for me, this is not the Ghostbusters movie that we've been waiting for, unfortunately. But at the same time, like I said, I get it. I mean, I get it, you know, like, yeah, I understand what Bill Murray is saying. So, you know, it's the one thing that concerns me, and I've said this before on live streams, I've said it on Patreon only shows, I've said it on my podcast with Tony Michael, Two Dudes and Some Bullshit, is it feels like, and Ghostbusters is a bit different because of the subject matter, but it feels like there's this the shtick that people want to use with Stranger Things. The gimmick, it's the 80s, riding around on your bikes with your friends and adventure, getting into all sorts of shenanigans and all that kind of shit. They want to take that and apply it to everything. And, you know, there's a very specific reason. That doesn't mean it's not going to work in modern times, but there's a very specific reason why that shtick, that sense of innocence and childhood adventure, riding your bikes and all that stuff, works in Stranger Things and worked in the summer of '84 and worked in the modernized version of it from a couple years ago, because they all have one thing in common, and that is they all take place in the 1980s. Now, the idea of going out on adventures with your bikes and, you're a kid and all that stuff certainly isn't, exclusively to the 1980s. I mean, people were doing that in the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. But certainly in terms of pop culture and movies, it definitely, thanks to the Goonies and, all that, it definitely had, and thanks to Stranger Things, the 80s was almost that last decade. You could make an argument for the 90s as well, but the 80s was kind of that last sort of real full decade where kids were doing that. Nowadays, it's not that kids aren't doing it, but generally speaking, kids are not out getting into shenanigans riding their bikes in 2019 because they're so self-absorbed with, the internet and video games and phones and tablets and screens and Snapchat and Facebook and so whatever the case is, that's where they're absorbed. So to take that shtick and that gimmick and apply it to something modern, like I got a sense they were trying to do with a new Child's Play movie, still might work. Like I'm getting the sense they're doing with Ghostbusters, still might work. I just think that you have to be careful when you start to Stranger Thingsify everything, because it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to translate well into modern times. But like I said, with a property like Ghostbusters, they may have a leg up with that kind of thing because of the type of subject matter it is. Ghosts, spirits, demons, magic. I mean, that's what Stranger Things is all about for all intents and purposes. So, I mean, they may have an advantage there as opposed to something like Child's Play or something else. So, we'll see. And again, it doesn't mean it's not going to work. It doesn't mean it's not going to work in Child's Play. I just think that there's these sort of things these shticky things that lend itself better to something, and I just don't think you necessarily have to translate it over into everything. But I certainly understand, when something's hot, you want to take advantage of it. So I will be very curious to see what kind of vibe this narrative has as more information comes out. Like I said, does Finn's character have, buddies that become the new Ghostbusters? Do you know what I mean? Him and his friends become the new generation? Yeah, that might happen. And then McKenna Grace becomes sort of like she's too young now, but she becomes more, say, like a new Annie Potts. Yeah, you know what I mean? It just feels like the potentiality is there for that. So I don't know. But yeah, the crux of the point is it's not going to be the Ghostbusters we've been waiting 30 years for. It will be a Ghostbusters 3 we've been waiting 30 years for. Anyways, folks, my name's Dave McRae. Comment below and let me know your thoughts. If you want to follow me on Facebook, you can at facebook.com/manythingsdavemcrae. That's where I tend to post in the meantime and in between time when I'm not posting here. The link is in the description. If you want to help support the channel each and every month on Patreon, that link is in the description as well as links to all my other stuff, my IMDb, my Twitter, my merch store, my official website. It's all down there. Click until your heart's content if you feel like it. If not, well, whatever. So yeah, comment below and let me know. So it's interesting. It's interesting, but you definitely can kind of get a sense. It's just a sense now. You kind of get a sense of maybe the direction they're kind of going. You know what I mean? Because there's only so many ways. There's only so many roads that lead from a family moves back home to a small town where they learn more about who they are. There's only so many roads that lead out from that. So anyways, comment below and let me know your thoughts. I'll talk to you guys soon. Cheers.